Family and fellow soldiers, I'm the professor, and this is the moment of truth.
And I think that neoconservatism, where does it arise from? It arises from Jewish leftists who were mugged by reality when they saw the surprise attack in the Yom Kippur War.
Yeah, well, that's a lot of it for sure. But then, like, how do you explain Mike Huckabee, Ted Cruz, and there are a lot like that, John Bolton. I mean, I've known them all, George W. Bush, like Karl Rove. I mean, all people I know personally who I've seen like be seized by this brain virus, and they're not Jewish.
What you're saying about putting aside the tribal interest for the corporate interest, that's absolutely the case. The main challenge to that, a big challenge to that, is organized Jewry in America.
And so the sort of mainstreaming, the popularization and normalization of Fuentes by Carlson is significantly more important than just Fuentes' existence, obviously. It was a seminal moment, I think, when it comes to the right's decision as to whether Tucker himself is a source of truth or whether he is a destructive force inside conservatism.
Hey, I don't know if you heard, but some podcaster named Charlie, let me look at this webpage. Oh yeah, Charlie Kirk died a couple of months back. Some people were acting like this was going to be some kind of 9/11 level incident and that it would go down in the annals of history and that all the remembrances and the phony tributes would just go on and on and on. But it didn't. Let's be honest, family. Donald Trump was grazed by an assassin's bullet, and that story got blown off the front page the very next day simply because Biden dropped out of the presidential race. So all the phony and pathetic attempts by the white right to make Charlie Kirk into a folk hero have failed. This is the final verdict on that one. And none of them ever believed him to be anything more than a grifter who had managed to get a lot of money from mega millionaires and billionaire investors to be their mouthpiece. He would spout their racist gibberish for them while they could go ahead and have semi-clean hands by sitting back and not having to do the dirty work themselves. And it seems that now with him gone, there's a lot of other individuals who would love to get in on that same hustle. We had the white right just a few weeks ago trying to manufacture this asinine narrative that Charlie Kirk had united and turbocharged the white right, and that they couldn't be more unified than they are now. But what we see is that was a lie because there's no honor among thieves, and all the pathetic Charlie Kirk tributes couldn't change that because nothing will change the nature of a white supremacist. And so here we are only a few weeks later and the white right's reverted to type and they're right back at each other's throats. We've seen this before, not surprisingly, during Trump's first term. The alt-right so-called Unite the Right rally in Charlottesville, which became a riot. That event was supposed to unite the right, it's in the name, but instead it wound up fracturing them, and you haven't heard from the alt-right since. Richard Spencer hasn't been seen or heard from very much. About the only ones you might have seen were Patriot Front, who used to be called Vanguard America in 2017. They had to change their name shortly after the Charlottesville riot because you'll recall one of their members ran over and killed Heather Heyer during that incident. There have been a lot of movements in the black grassroots, but they never devolved into this kind of backbiting and people turning on each other. That's because the movements involving us come from a pure place, an honest place. Our movements and the people we lionize are the result of moral conscience and not some white billionaire's bankroll. These white right-wing nuts are the front men for white dark-moneyed interest, but times like this forces them out of the shadows. The death of Charlie Kirk has forced a conversation the white right tried to have behind closed doors, but spilled out into the open anyway, and now we have all these Fox News trolls who are at each other's throats. And it's playing out in public. People who had spent years, if not decades, pretending as if they were all chummy, and it seemed like they were, but of course, whenever power's up for grabs, that shows where everyone truly stands. This is why the Orange Man being back in the White House is a good thing, because before now they had the distraction and the deflection of pointing to Biden and Harris, or whatever Democrat was in office or in power, and saying, look over there, those socialists are going to wreck everything. The unifying principles of white supremacy are fear and hate. But with Republicans in control of the entire government, they have to face their own internal contradictions, and they're turning their knives on each other now, because there's no one else to turn them on. Now, of course, this doesn't mean that the white left are the good guys here. They suck up and kowtow to the exact same white-moneyed interests as the white right, so they want to get back into power so they can resume doling out favors and money to their own pals and relatives. Family, you need to understand that's the only thing that these people want to be in office for, because it's being in office that makes it where they can leverage policy in exchange for rewards from the plutocrats. Jim Clyburn becomes a member of Congress. Then his incompetent little daughter mysteriously gets on the FCC despite having no qualifications to be there. And then when she leaves, she's instantly getting make-work jobs from the very communications cartel that she was supposed to have been regulating. Now, why on earth would any communications company want to put a former regulator on their payroll for any reason? After all, aren't these the people who are putting all of these rules and restrictions on these companies, right? That's what the white right tells us anyway, but is that true? If it was, then why would they do things like that? And that's why they lose their minds and they want you to be terrified at the prospect of them losing their government offices. Because all they can do is sell out to power. And that's a skill set that doesn't have a whole lot of demand. And speaking of people with no skills, Ted Cruz has gotten his depends in a wad over Tucker Carlson apparently running afoul of the Israel lobby and quote-unquote platforming people like Nick Fuentes. And now Cruz is running around saying that Tucker Carlson's got too much power and he's got too much influence and the party's going to have to stand up to him because he's got all of this influence that he shouldn't have. I consider that to be doubly amusing. Ted Cruz is from Texas, and he had nothing to say about Tucker Carlson's outsized influence over the GOP when Carlson used it to prompt Greg Abbott to give a pardon to an unrepentant murderer who killed a BLM protester. And the only reason Tucker Carlson felt so determined to demand a pardon for that murderer was because he thought this would be a good political statement against the left, specifically against black activists, to show that he could get a white supremacist killer off the hook after murdering someone. And as we all remember, this move by Carlson was directly responsible for Ben Shapiro, trying the exact same stunt on behalf of twice-convicted murderer Derek Chauvin. This is what the white right was doing up until a couple of months ago. These guys were perfectly in lockstep, and the reason they were able to do it was because they were all shooting their guns at the exact same target. Black people. But now, without black people to dump on or distract to, they're showing everybody that they literally cannot agree on anything else. Kevin Roberts, the president of the Heritage Foundation, tried to stick up for his buddy Tucker Carlson and basically was trying to give the old white rights, well, freedom of speech and all that.
The Heritage Foundation didn't become the intellectual backbone of the conservative movement by canceling our own people or policing the consciences of Christians. And we won't start doing that now. We don't take direction from comments on X, though we are grateful for the robust free speech debate. We also don't take direction from members or donors, though we are inherently grateful for their support. We will always defend truth. We will always defend America, and we will always defend our friends against the slander of bad actors who serve someone else's agenda. That includes Tucker Carlson, who remains, and as I have said before, always will be a close friend of the Heritage Foundation. The venomous coalition attacking him are sowing division. Their attempt to cancel him will fail. I disagree with, and even abhor, things that Nick Fuentes says. But canceling him is not the answer either. When we disagree with a person's thoughts and opinions, we challenge those ideas in debate. And we have seen success in this approach as we continue to dismantle the vile ideas of the left. As my friend Vice President Vance said last night, what I am not okay with is any country coming before the interest of American citizens, and it is important for all of us, assuming we are American citizens, to put the interest of our own country first. That's where our allegiance lies, and that's where it will stay.
But I think it's safe to say that those billionaires who have been bankrolling the white right, they let him know you're going to have to walk that one back, because that's exactly what Roberts did.
We ended our relationship with Heritage. We're working with many Jewish groups that have ended their relationship with Heritage. And what really I have to do is talk to my colleagues, because the biggest issue we have with Tucker Carlson is people remember the Tucker Carlson of 5 years ago. That's what makes him so dangerous.
I didn't know much about this Fuentes guy. I still don't, which underscores the mistake. I can tell you with a clear conscience and not making any excuses that those were my intentions, to fix all of that. And obviously I didn't. I made them worse.
Now, the Israel lobby believes in one rule above all others, and that is to crush small acts of defiance today to prevent outright rebellion tomorrow. They are ultra hypersensitive to attacking anyone who even remotely appears to disagree with them. And for decades now, they've been largely successful. So you can guess the amount of phony outrage that's been coming against the Heritage Foundation and Kevin Roberts. And for those of you who are surprised that the Heritage Foundation, at least for a hot minute, seemed to actually be standing up to the Israel lobby and making it very clear that whether or not Nick Fuentes was an anti-Semite or not didn't really mean that much to them, if you listen to the black media, you wouldn't be surprised at all. Back in 2017, I made my now classic video, Why Roger Ailes Isn't Going Away, which I reposted on this YouTube channel. In that video, I talked about how Roger Ailes started off in TV as a producer for the Mike Douglas show in the 1960s. That's where he met Richard Nixon. But I also told you about how the Republicans have been trying to start their own right-wing TV news network back in the early 70s, and how Roger Ailes was a part of those attempts. One of those abortive attempts to get a right-wing network off the ground was bankrolled by Roger Coors, one of the heirs to the Coors brewing fortune. Coors was a big donor to right-wing organizations, including the John Birch Society, which was one of the most notorious anti-black and anti-Semitic organizations in U.S. history. After the conservative icon William F. Buckley denounced the Birchers, it was no longer cool to give money to them, so Joseph Coors used his money to create a new organization with the exact same mission as the Birchers, the Heritage Foundation. It's just a clumsy front for a white pride organization, and the same way that the Birchers were anti-Semites, the same ideological DNA is also in the Heritage Foundation. So while the Israel lobby might have thought that they were friends, the black media knew better. There's been a number of people on the white right who have been waiting for decades to give the finger to the Israel lobby and what they stand for. These were the people who stormed the Capitol waving Nazi flags and wearing shirts that said 6 million wasn't enough. They've always bristled at having to make nice with people who their fathers and grandfathers and great-grandfathers called a foreign conspiracy. During the Second World War, they blocked Jews from coming to the United States, and now these same people's children and grandchildren are the very ones who the Israel lobby has to deal with. Supporting Israel's genocide in Gaza was always seen as a political bank shot by the white right. The Muslims have numbers, so they need to be attacked, but the Jews have power, so they also need to be attacked. Take care of the guys with more numbers first. Israel's destruction of Gaza dealt the Arabs a blow, but when it also made Israel unpopular on the world stage, the white right recognized this as a chance to weaken them. Divide and conquer. Get your enemies to attack one another, and then take down whichever one of them is still standing. This is a tactic white power has used as far back as the Romans. But the reason for this morning's briefing is to remind you that you shouldn't make too much out of this. This is not going to be some final collapse of the white right. What it's going to be is more proof that the only thing that holds these creeps together is having black people as their enemy. Hating us is the unifying principle for them and has been that way for 500 years. When you look at Ukraine, when you look at the fracturing white right, you see what Europe was before they had us to kick around. They were going in on each other 24/7. They tried to use everything from monarchy to religion to culture as a unifying principle for them, but it didn't work. The kings didn't have enough character to command loyalty, religion required them to have morality, which they didn't, and they never had a culture. So when a few of them turned to anti-black racism, they at least had something they could finally use that allowed them to have a social framework, one that said we have to protect ourselves and our position from those black people over there. The white elites told the rank-and-file white people that they were better than black people and to protect their jobs, their neighborhoods, and their white women from the big bad black folks, and that they could indulge their violent whims freely. That would be some of the tangible benefits, but for the most part, that was enough to get them on board and keep them on board. But as we saw at the end of the 19th century, when colonialism had covered the globe, in less than 20 years there was a world war among those same European colonial powers. This was the historical answer to the question, what does the dog do when it catches the car? What do the white supremacists do when they succeed in enslaving and slaughtering all these black people? They turn on each other. But by now, we should know that this doesn't mean that they've given up on their sick white supremacist project. What it means is they're having an open argument about the best way to pursue that project. Of course, they're showing everyone that they never liked each other. The white supremacist doesn't respect anyone because in reality, he doesn't even respect himself. And when you look at their behavior, you see exactly why that is. No matter how pretty a face they may try to put on it, no matter how many millions and millions of dollars that they pour into the concrete of that foundation, white supremacy is still a lie, starting with the lie of solidarity. The idea of white superiority is a lie, the idea of white cultural excellence is a lie, and the idea of white solidarity has been proven a lie yet again. The glue that makes them seem to play nice together, at least for a while, are the goodies, giveaways, and guarantees that are bestowed on them by being classified as white. This is what gives them the tangible, though mostly intangible benefits that keeps them on code. But the bigots at the top, they know what the real game is, and it's ultimately one of self-interest. That's something the bootlicks will never understand. If this is how the white supremacist treats their own, then what makes you think they'll tolerate your sorry behind? So I say let them fight. What they're doing right now is not an effort to crush Tucker Carlson. They'll do that if it comes to it. But what this is actually about is a struggle to get him back on code. And the same way that president of the Heritage Foundation did an about-face as soon as some pressure was put on him, Tucker Carlson could very well do the same. In fact, about the only reason that more of the white right hasn't taken Tucker Carlson's side is because Tucker Carlson's been able to get cozy with Arab benefactors. People like Kevin Roberts have not. They don't have any sort of people from the Middle East who might pay their bills potentially one day. If the Israeli lobby and their U.S. allies can find a way to thread that needle and walk that fine line, Tucker Carlson could very well come back. Don't be surprised if that happens. And they'll all be going about business as usual as if nothing had changed. But understand something. That's the reason why our grandmaster teachers like Dr. John Henrik Clarke had taught us how the European solidarity had fractured numerous times in the past. But he also explained that the reason that had happened was they had to go to people who had more power than themselves, more resources than themselves. The European learned that lesson. That's the reason why they've been hyper-fixated on making sure that everybody remains as powerless as possible, especially black people. It's okay for these other folks to have some nickels to rub together. It's okay for them to have some power, but black people, no. You absolutely got to hold black people down no matter what. Because if not, these same individuals who try to play act at being so unified, man, they would turn on each other in a hot minute. It's certainly happened before. And that's the reason why Tucker Carlson is finding himself under fire. Whether or not he's going to relent, who can say? But one thing is for absolute certain. The only reason, and I mean only reason, that these guys are even having this argument in the first place is because Tucker Carlson made nice with somebody who was talking about non-black people all grimy and slimy. As long as these people were talking about black people, the Ben Shapiros and other professional BS artists, they had no problem with Nick Fuentes whatsoever. But when he started aiming his ire at them, now all of a sudden there's a problem. The same way that Richard Spencer had these white media outlets who were giving him all of these charitable write-ups, Nick Fuentes has also been getting the treatment, believe it or not. It's interesting watching all of this tongue wrestling and rhetorical scuffling between these podcasters and their mega billionaire would-be donors. Everybody loves to try to take shots at black people and say that we're so disorganized and that we're so ununified. And yet, for some reason, nobody's attaching this to white culture in general, what's going on with the white right. They've got all the resources in the world, and yet look what happens when these guys have even a small disagreement. They're ready to kill each other. That's what happens when you lack honor. You can fake it as much as you want, but reality always gets the last word. But the lesson to be taken away for black people from all of this is, what's the major difference between this bunch of scumbags and cutthroats having unity and black people who are still working on it? The difference is resources. That's what they dangle in front of one another to keep each other in line. And obviously that kind of bribery would never work with the black grassroots. But the pertinent question for us is, in the event that the white right does have a full-blown political civil war against each other, how do we make sure that no matter which one of these scumbags loses, black empowerment wins? Good day, and be one. I'd like to take a moment to mention some of our contributors: Walter Wilborn, Frederica Moore, Morris Bodden, Wesley Monroe, and Charles Hairston. Salute to them, and thank you to everyone for listening, liking, and sharing this message. Black empowerment only exists because of you.